Oh man, this whole place just looks incredible. Everything's so fresh. I get so excited every time I come here. Hi, I'm Audra Morrice and I'm here at the bustling Sydney Growers Market. Super excited to be a part of this week's market menu. Super fresh, super green, love it. Hey guys, I'm here at Patty's Kitchen at Haymarket. So today we're going to be cooking up something called asparagus goreng. This is quite a traditional dish in Singapore, and we call it traditionally made with tempeh, which is fermented soybeans. But today I'm going to do tofu. I've picked up this deep fried tofu and we're going to kind of just pan sear them. Alright, so for this recipe I'm just going to use a half and just pat it dry, because there's always a little bit of moisture in the packet. So just pat it dry with some paper towels. So I'm just going to dice them up into little 1 to 1.5 centimeter squares. Halve it this way. So with a stir fry, you want to have everything prepped before you start. So I've got my tofu here, my prawns are here. Now with the prawns, peel them. Just make sure that you get a fork in here, just poke it through, and then you can pull the poo shoot out, right? Because you don't want to eat that. Try and get prawns that are as small as possible for this particular dish. So that's done. Now we're going to cut up the asparagus. Most people just take an asparagus and they break it, but I kind of find sometimes that you waste a lot of the asparagus. So all I'm going to do, about 1 inch from the bottom, I'm just going to cut it off. With the asparagus, we're going to cook them up separately. So I really just kind of want them same size as the tofu essentially, right? All right, next I'm going to grab some garlic. I've got about 5, maybe about 5 cloves here. Quickest way to chop up garlic, because you're going to finally chop it anyway. Back of your knife, smash it, and the skin just comes off very easily. And roughly chop it. Now, so I'm going to grab some chilies. Now, this dish has to have chilies. We tried this at the market and they're not too spicy, so I'm going to add in a couple of these beautiful Thai bird's eye. They're delicious, and it's going to give it a really nice kick. Good way to test chilies, I find, is if you take the tip off. Ooh, that's got a bit of heat. So finely slice your chilies. When it's really spicy, I die. It's hot! That's the thing about chilies, you never know whether they're going to be spicy or not. So always try them before you use them. Alright, so next up, I'm going to use lemongrass. So whenever you're cooking lemongrass, as in putting it in a stir fry, you want to remove as much of the woody bits as possible. So get rid of the bottom rooty bit, and the top just comes off quite nicely. With this, I would keep this for something else, maybe freeze it if you want to use it for a curry or whatever. Pull it out of the freezer, thump it, and then chuck it into your curry. So keep that, don't throw. This is what we're going to use for today's cooking. So it's really nice and tender on the inside, but you have to slice it really finely, otherwise it gets a bit woody and chewy. Slice it as finely as you can. All right, next up, onion. So this is quite a big one. I'm probably only going to use about half of this. Look how beautiful they are on the inside. Yum. I really like using red onions because I find it's a little bit sweeter and it gives great color as well. And we're just going to finely slice it, and this will give the dish a little bit of sweetness. So the only other thing we'll need is a tamarind. Now I've used the tamarind pulp, added some water into it, let it sit for a while, and then we're going to strain it off. And all we need to do now is pass them through a sieve, because we want just the liquid, yeah? And press out as much of the pulp and liquid as possible so you get a little bit of a puree. Now I've had these dried chilies soaking for a while. They're quite nice and soft now. We're just going to give them a bit of a pound, just to mince them up a little bit, and they're going to go into the stir fry. So dried chilies and fresh chilies both give different flavors. This will be a lot sort of earthy and smoky, whereas your fresh chilies obviously give you that amount of freshness, right? So just roughly chop this, and we're just going to bung them in the mortar and pestle. We're just making a little bit of a chili paste. It doesn't have to be super fine, but enough to just kind of permeate into the oil and the dish. You don't have to make it super fine, just mushy and a little bit pasty, and that's sufficient. I brought my trusty old wok today. With stir fries, you want really hot surfaces because you don't want things to boil or broil. You want it to kind of sear. So heat on. It's carbon steel, so it heats very quickly. See, it's smoking, it's pretty hot, so oil goes in. A couple of tablespoons. Everything goes in. We've got our onions, our chilies, lemongrass, garlic. Oh, it's smelling so good. Oh, delicious. I think the entire market's gonna crowd around here later on, huh? Hello! Oh, love it. Right, next up, add in a touch more oil because we're gonna get that dried chili going. So fry that up in the middle. Ooh, smells good. Okay, this is when everything else goes in. So tofu goes in. But remember, if you're using a different type of tofu, just make sure you give it a good pan-sear beforehand. But these ones are fine. So prawns go in. And give it a really good mix, but don't over stir it. So when your prawns are almost there, that's when everything else goes in. The sugar first. I know it looks like a lot of sugar, but really there isn't too much because you got to balance it out with the sourness of the tamarind, yeah? A little bit of salt. Our green asparagus goes in. About a minute. You really don't need more than a minute because it's so fresh. Your purple asparagus goes in and toss it. So here you go, guys. This is my recipe. It's my asparagus goreng. And I'm just gonna add a couple of chilies just in case you want it hotter. So for the full recipe, go to pattysmarkets.com.au.